Hey, it's Alex Williams, the New Stack, here at our continuing coverage from the Open Source Summit in Los Angeles, California. Joining me today is Abby Kearns of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Hey, Abby, great to see you again.
Always fun to be on the New Stack.
I think the last time we talked, it was like the end of the Cloud Foundry Summit. And we're barely hanging on to the table to try to talk. So now you're fresh because you just came in from London.
I am. I'm fresh. I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
You're at ThingMonk?
I was at ThingMonk.
I love their events.
The Red Monk events are always really great and have a ton of great curated content. So it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, I've only been to the ThingMonk event, but it was a lot of fun when I went. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit today about the evolution of this landscape that we're seeing. I think it's really reflected here at the Open Source Summit and in a lot of the discussions that we saw at VMworld around Pivotal's move and Google's move into thinking about BOSH and in its context with Kubernetes. And I'm curious about that and its impact on Cloud Foundry, because you have been behind this Kubo project. So perhaps you could just give us an update about the Kubo project in Cloud Foundry and what we should see going forward into your big summit coming up in Basel, Switzerland.
Well, absolutely. So Kubernetes, if you haven't heard about that, is a container orchestration. It is an open source project that's part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And Kubernetes has grown in maturity and evolution and community over the last couple of years. And towards the end of last year, Pivotal and Google started talking about how they could collaborate around Kubernetes. And Kubo was born. And Kubo is essentially, it's Kubernetes that is managed by BOSH. And BOSH is the it's basically underpinnings of Cloud Foundry in terms of orchestration and management of the platform. And so Kubo was born last year, and a lot of work was done throughout the first half of this year. And then it was officially contributed to Cloud Foundry Foundation in June. And then PKS, which was a joint venture between Pivotal and Google and VMware, was announced at VMworld a couple of weeks ago, as you just referenced. And PKS is the first commercial distribution of Kubo. What we'd hope to be the first of many. And it really represents an exciting shift around Cloud Foundry in the story that it's still the right tool for the right job, but there's an opportunity to have all of that managed in a single platform.
It really shows the evolution of Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry on these different projects. There's much more of almost like a services fabric that we're seeing emerge underneath it all, isn't there?
Well, absolutely, because it isn't just enough to have a container or have a container orchestrator. It's having the abilities to manage that at scale securely. And so when we think about the majority of our users right now, which over half the Fortune 500 are running Cloud Foundry somewhere. And so we look at the Fortune 500, and one of their chief concerns is being able to run application workloads at scale securely, so meeting their current security and compliance requirements. And so as we take those factors in, is how do we continue to embrace the evolving technology, but as well as meet the needs of a variety of application workloads.
So one of the things that I've noticed in discussions with people and just reading the news and blog posts on our site and elsewhere is this real discussion that almost loops us back to 5 years ago, where we're hearing discussions more about platform as a service almost. Even though platform as a service does seem like a concept of a few years ago, but with BOSH and with Cloud Foundry and the ability to manage, your platforms, more flexibly, it seems like we're seeing this evolution of the past in many ways, and that we're starting to see with this service, the services environments underneath, it's like kind of a new generation of PaaS. Would you agree with that or not?
No, and I don't really like the terminology of PaaS, but as you pointed out, it is a growing market. When I think about platform as a service and I think about Cloud Foundry, I actually think of Cloud Foundry more as a cloud application platform, because at the end of the day, it's solid. Its vision is to enable developers to get an application into production as quickly as possible. So it's really focusing on that application and getting that out there and getting it managed and get it orchestrated. So when I think about these other technologies, it was great to be able to pair them together to be able to run a variety of workloads. And I think that is important. It's because there isn't going to be, not all applications are going to be 12-factor apps or cloud-native applications. There's still a variety of applications out there and will continue to be out there that really require a different way of thinking. So, for example, TensorFlow, if you're trying to do machine learning technologies, that's a good example of something that wouldn't necessarily be run on a platform like Cloud Foundry, but could run alongside it to really allow applications to take advantage of that.
Interesting. So, as these cloud technologies evolve, as cloud native technologies evolve, and container technologies have evolved, and we're seeing platforms like Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry's been around longer than those technologies themselves. What are customers wanting? What are they asking for? Because with this maturity means that they put more into production. So
Absolutely.
Security is one issue. What about networking? What about storage? What about these other issues that are so fundamental to these companies' enterprise environments?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are still evolving concerns, because what works now for limited applications and deployment isn't necessarily going to solve the same concerns when you're running, hundreds of thousands of apps at scale. And I do think storage and networking are chief concerns. And it's really interesting to see investments being made in technology, particularly on the open source side in both. So we have CNI, the container networking interface, that Cloud Foundry is taking advantage of, that's really starting to address those. Really, how do you do container networking? How are you managing that orchestration? And then that really evolves into service discovery and service management around, like, say, microservices. And on the storage side, it's been really great to see the work happening around CSI, the container storage interface.
Right.
And the flexibility that abstraction can start to build in as more work is done around both sides.
That's interesting. CNI, I've been hearing a lot more about it. As I was talking to a customer today on the way over here, and I was asking this person about what they're doing, and I said, well, what about the networking and security? I said, well, the networking group is pretty much trying to stay independent of us right now, but we see CNI as that as that bridge, and CSI as well, and like technologies such as it's in technologies such as RexRay, projects from like companies like Dell, so you can have that storage interface, right?
Dell EMC, or Dell Technologies as a whole is really investing a lot in both. With the PKS announcement at VMworld, they also talked about the integration between the PKS as well as NSX, which is a really quickly growing technology that VMware acquired, and is really adding that software-defined aspect to the networking that a lot of organizations are starting to use to do network segmentation and things like that. And then, you're also seeing Dell EMC investing a lot on the storage side as they're trying to grow and meet the demands of both on-prem as well as public cloud solutions.
Mm-hmm. With that, NSX is a proprietary technology, and so I'm curious about that integration of these technology stacks. I guess the story here is about options, right? You can use open source networking technologies, or you can use something that's more mature with maybe that interface than to like something like NSX, and because NSX has been proven as a networking technology in itself.
Well, I'd say you see a lot of these enterprises using a mixture, right, of technologies. So sometimes you'll see NSX coupled with Calico.
Right.
On some of the network segmentation and network orchestration pieces, as I try to figure out how to run virtual workloads and still meet compliance requirements, right? And and having that separation. So I think that right now you're seeing a mixture of both. Open source, though, is really growing and evolving as more and more organizations are really starting to collaborate. Since we're at the Open Source Summit, ONAP was created, I believe, earlier this year, which is really coalescing a lot of the open source networking work that's being done within the Linux Foundation, and pulling in projects like OPNFV and others that are starting to work on that abstraction, the software-defined networking, and then pulling that all the way up the stack.
Interesting. And that then circles us back to Kubernetes, right? And Cloud Foundry with Bosch is that underlying. How would you describe Bosch? Underlying what, resource, or how would you describe Bosch in that context? I mean,
Bosch is easily described as something that is really managing the infrastructure.
Right.
So it's managing the infrastructure down,
right.
Whereas Cloud Foundry is managing above the infrastructure
Okay.
towards the app. So think about them as very separate concerns. But what Bosch allows you to do is say, run Cloud Foundry on any cloud seamlessly and consistently. What it allows it to do is really brings your containers back to the known good. So it makes sure that they're constantly spinning up containers when there's a failure or an issue. So Bosch is really looking at the infrastructure down and making sure that what runs above it continues to have that consistent platform to look to.
So you're thinking about Kubo, for example, right? In the context of Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry, it's the networking and storage stories are related to what we were talking about, I guess. But is Bosch where's the Bosch story kind of in that?
Bosch is so the container orchestration piece, the Kubernetes piece, is really focusing on managing the containers.
Right.
So it's the containers
Right.
that you're putting applications in.
Right.
But Bosch is really providing that ability to scale that out and update it and upgrade it and make sure there's resiliency in that, looking at the infrastructure piece up, right? So it's really sitting beneath the container orchestrator in the infrastructure and making sure that it's continuously available, continuously updatable, and easy to manage.
So it's looking at is it looking at the resiliency of the networking and the storage then too?
It's looking at the resiliency of what's been allocated, right? So it's looking to make sure that everything is available and accessible. Is the VM accessible and available? Is the container available and accessible? So it's constantly looking at that infrastructure piece. So if it's running on, say, vSphere, it's looking at, is that up? Is it running? Is it available? Or if it's on AWS, or if it's on GCP or Azure, it's really making sure that it has that checkpoint.
So if it is a networking issue, for example, that can be detected and then managed
within certain confines. I mean, it's not resolving a lot of network issues because that's not what it does. But I think that's where a lot of the stronger investments that, say, VMware is making on making those highly resilient, or Cisco is making around looking into the resiliency on just the pure networking
because it's really
piece.
an entirely different stack entirely,
Exactly.
right? So it's a different networking stack, a different storage stack.
Right. So, Bosch is really saying, is the VM there? Is it good?
And so if it's not there and you can't eliminate all the issues that it is, you can start to say, oh, it could be more of a networking problem, or it could be more of a storage issue.
Yeah.
And then plan accordingly, then deal with it accordingly.
But the goal is just to kind of keep bringing it back to its known good state when it can.
The thing is that I get curious about is isn't Kubernetes just fine as a highly available environment in itself? And why do you even need Bosch?
Well, because people care about patching and scale and bringing up new clusters and really
Kubernetes does have some issues with patching, doesn't it? Or no?
Well, it's just a matter of if you're running a couple of hundred clusters. What does that look like when you're an operator? And what does that experience look like? And I think there's still a lot of evolving to go, but having that abstraction underneath it really makes that an easier job for an operator so that you can run Kubernetes and run, thousands of those clusters and really organize those in a way that makes it easy for you to do as an operator.
So what's the differentiation for Kubernetes, if it's Kubernetes, on Bosch versus Kubernetes, in development that we've seen prior to Bosch's, to Bosch's availability with Kubernetes? What's the differentiation there?
Well, speaking from Cloud Foundry standpoint,
yeah.
When I think about Bosch, I think giving the enterprises and large organizations the ability to run Kubernetes at scale efficiently. Because one of the visions around Cloud Foundry is being able to run these workloads securely at scale without adding additional burden onto the operator, making their lives easier. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is how do we make an operator's job easier as you're starting to run more and more of these cloud-native applications.
Okay. So there may be ease of use done in different kinds of ways, but this is your approach, right? So some people might find the ease of use with Kubernetes not running on Bosch.
Sure.
But you have a lot of users who are running Bosch already.
Right.
And this provides them kind of that opportunity. So what is the value add for those operators who have been using Cloud Foundry but haven't been using Kubernetes? what is the opportunity for those operators?
Well, the opportunity is for them to using either Kubo or distribution of Kubo to bring up additional workloads and have side-by-side management of those different workloads, so that you could connect them, say, with the Open Service Broker API, and allow those service calls to be pulled in much easier. So, data ingest heavy applications, or like I mentioned, TensorFlow or anything like that you want to run, but you want to have that ability to have a single orchestration strand around that and make it easier for people to run both, because there are many technologies that Kubernetes is amazing at managing and organizing, and that was something that we took very seriously, is how do we leverage this amazing, growing, evolving technology and also offer that capability to our users in a way that they can take advantage of both, but still have the ability to operate them.
Great. So we're going into the fall season, and you're going to be hosting the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland.
Be there.
Be there.
Or be square.
Could you give a preview of it for us?
It's going to be amazing. It's October 11th, 12th in Basel, Switzerland. Who doesn't love to do fall in Switzerland?
Fall in Switzerland. Just sounds so... I was going to try to say cheesy, but that's not quite it. But,
We're going to do fall in Switzerland. We're going to hang out together in a small, intimate environment of you and your 1,000 closest friends. We're going to talk about cloud native things. Wow. What could be better than that?
Well, we'll be there for sure.
You'll be there. I'll be there. A lot of amazing companies are going to be there talking about what they've been doing. And
lessons learned kind of things.
Right.
Too.
And we see a lot of that in the North America Summit. But what's exciting about Europe is that it's also doing a tremendous amount of work.
Right.
So we're going to hear from companies like SAP and Allianz and Bosch and Daimler and Volkswagen and so many others that are doing such amazing things with Cloud Foundry. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing all of those stories.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to join us for a little chat, Abby. And it's always good to talk with you. And you're doing such interesting things at the Cloud Foundry Foundation. So we look forward to keeping in touch and seeing you there in Basel.
We better.
Yeah, of course.